Right. Let's get started with the webinar.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody. So this is the fourth webinar series of the series Psychologist sessions with Hana and Jamali. We've been doing them since the spring, and this time around, as usual, we'll be doing a 45-minute session in total. And we're gonna deep dive into the topic of feeling more like a person and less like a patient today. A couple of things to highlight. First of all, Hana Jamali is a licensed psychologist and organizational consultant, specializing in crisis management on an individual as well as organizational level with 12 years of experience. Some general housekeeping rules. If you've joined via the browser, we suggest you rejoin and download the Zoom app for the best experience, such as the ability to ask questions. We already have received a bunch of questions, and we will be talking about them later down the line. However, if you feel like you want to shoot out questions throughout the webinar, don't hesitate. We will make sure to bring them up. So, feeling more like a person and less like a victim. I remember this one being the most difficult. One of them, for me personally, this was the toughest bit of going through cancer, to go through your normal, everyday life, everyday experience, where you have your idea of who you are, a person. I have this job, I have these type of friends and these things. This is what I do. This is the concept of me, Fabian. And then all of a sudden, just with the only difference is you having received a diagnosis, all of a sudden notice how everybody changes around you. Everybody, not a single person around you treats you in the same way. For good and for bad. What I learned, first of all, which was a wonderful experience, was that there are so many people that care about you. Right. Sadly, it takes something like this. It's like such a deadly diagnosis or severe crisis for them to actually express how much they care about you. But that was a wonderful. I found myself in deep conversations with many friends from high school and people that had really, closed chapters who came back and started connecting with me. And I had loads of wonderful sort of chats with people that I thought were no longer a part of my life. And all of a sudden they were back again. But I guess the negatives outweighed the positives because you could just feel and touch upon the pity from people. It's the way they are. Most people have a negative association with cancer, either from personal experiences or from having watched a lot of commercials about cancer, mostly about donating to cancer. So whoever is doing the commercials have an interest in making sure that cancer is an ugly and horrible experience and creates the sensation in the viewer. So that, of course, creates a super toxic climate where even though I knew from pretty soon into my journey that I was going to survive cancer, and began to feel my personal the personal inner journey take form, I was still being treated like someone who is going to die, who is about to die. And that super negatively affected my mental health. And I was angry with the people who treated me like this. But after a while, I stopped being angry at them and I was just angry at the whole situation because it felt unfair and it just sucked. So and this is, of course, something we talk a lot about in in our work at War on Cancer, when we deep dive into mental health and these things, coming into the actual topic here, I mean, being treated like a person or being treated like yourself, and not a victim. What does that mean? Because, and I think to break down this conversation, I think we ought to start with the question, how do you define self? First of all, what is yourself? And then secondly, in order to make this a constructive journey together, I think we should set up two camps where we have a lot of people going through cancer that just want to get back to exactly the same thing again. They want their old self back, their old idea of who they are back. They don't want any change. Whilst you have another type of person going through cancer that sort of start to look at what is the potential for me here, because I'm through this crisis. How can I become a new version of myself?
Right.
But let's start with, what is the definition of self?
Yeah. And thank you. I always feel so privileged when I hear, because you're so generous with your experience. And since I've had the privilege to have quite a lot of patients who've gone through cancer, and they share a lot of similarities with what you're talking about right now, or they have, some of them have their story is quite alike. And you're talking about, if I just connect back to what you said before, you talked a bit about you had good experiences and you had bad experiences. You somehow came to the depth of relationship with this experience. So you had, via your crisis, you found a closer relationship to your surrounding, with your friends and your family. You had conversations and you explored things where you've never been before. And you also felt loved. It sounded like you felt really loved in that position. But then you also said that the negative part of that was about, really, I could hear you saying, losing my autonomy in that, or feeling that people saw me as a person not having that autonomy, as a victim, you said. And of course, these two extremes are really hard for our mind to grasp, right? So at the one hand, you're really loved and you're appreciated. On the other hand, you lost your autonomy. So who am I in this? And that usually causes crisis for us, because if you only had one of them, it would somehow be easier to understand and just be like, okay, I'm being victimized now, or I'm really loved. But when you're having both of them, it's really hard to know. So who am I in all of this? Apparently I have something because I'm loved. I've done stuff for people, and we have this relationship that's not built on my cancer. It's built on something else. So apparently there's something there about me, the self, that people appreciate and love. But at the other hand, they're doing something that I don't recognize in our relationship. There's a shift, and you could call it power, or a shift in the dynamic of the relationship that also changes, that I need to be aware of. So this creates a lot of scatter in your mind and in your feelings. And to really think about the question you said, so how, for the people who want to go back to their real selves or their past selves, and the people who want to move on and explore this new part, I would say for both of those people, there's not really an option, because when all of this happens, you need to somehow cope, right? So that's the first step. Yeah. You need to cope with this change that's going on in your life. And then some people might have I can cope, but I still want to get back to where I was. That's, one form of doing it. And the other one is, okay, so now that I've coped, who am I now? I have my past self and I have this experience. So what can I use, and how can I puzzle up a new kind of me, right? So either way, I would say, either way, with the coping, you will become different.
Yeah.
You might still love your past life or the way you had it and want to go back. And for some people, you might want to change. So if the question is, what do I do then, depending on who of these persons I am, I would say,
Well, no, I think the first question is, what is self?
what is self, right?
Yeah, and then what do I do as a second question? But the
Right.
first one is, I think, a super important question. That is, I guess, one of the most ancient questions there is.
Yeah.
What is your definition of self? What is it?
A definition of self, I really like that you said it's an ancient question, because it's more philosophical, right? Like, who am I in this world? What is a self? What makes us people, etc. And I would say normally people who go through crisis are the first people to ask themselves these kind of questions. So usually when you have your life and you're, you know, doing life, maybe you're a teenager, you're up in that, or you're in the middle of your career, or you've just had kids, or you're a grandparent, or whatever, wherever you are in life, you're quite in that bubble of life. So for some people, the question comes up every now and then, but when you're in a crisis, you don't really have an option. That just happens because of what we talked about before, because of all of those experiences of being loved and questioning yourself and who you are. Normally, you get to that stage pretty quickly, I would say, of questioning what is the self? Who am I? What do I, what do I enjoy? What do I want my life to be about? Am I doing meaningful things? Or all of these like really philosophical questions. So I would say, what defines a self? Well, there's a lot of theories about that, but I would say that a crisis helps you sort more. So when you're in a crisis, you want to ask yourself that question. And when you do, it's easier for you to see, so what do I want my life to, I can't come up with the English word now, but innehålla, can you help me, Fabian?
Contain.
Contain, yeah, contain.
So so do you mean that your self is your experiences?
A part of that is your experiences. I would say a big chunk of it is, but there's also other things that you might not have explored before the crisis. And that's the part that becomes quite grayish for you, because you will need to explore new things. And by exploring, I don't just mean external things, I mean things within yourself as well.
Yeah.
Like, what are feelings, thoughts, what's real and what is not? So it becomes like really philosophical as well. So it's not just when I talk about experiences, I don't mean actual physical experiences only.
Well, I'm not going to pressure you more on this question. I mean, it's a long conversation. And some say it's just your consciousness, your awareness. The rest is not you, as in your thoughts, your feelings, and all these things is not you. What is you is just the fact that you are awareness, aware of your surroundings and your feelings and everything that's happening around you. Whilst others say your memories are part of yourself. So I think that's another conversation. But let's move it into the topic for today. So, or sort of, let's go into hands-on things that a person can do. So let's take the two camps, the people that just want everything to get back to what they were, how things were before, and they want to reclaim their old self. And then you have the people that are curious about exploring a potential new self.
Yeah.
No, what are some basic advice here? How do you regain stability? How do you assess, how do you find that sense of normality in this chaotic? Because that's what both of those camps will have to do anyways.
Yeah. And I think one important thing is because the theme today is also about how do I move from being a patient to becoming a person. And I think just like I said before now, that it's not only about your external experiences, it's also about your internal experiences. So I would say that one important thing, it doesn't matter what camp you want to go to, you need to define for yourself, what do I value? What's important to me? Because even if you want to go back, it's probably because there's a lot in your life that you really value, and you valued how you lived your life, and what it contained also. So you need to see, so with this experience and what I've gone through, what are the things I want to go back to, and how will my journey be? Do I have the capacity to do it fully like I did before? If not, how can I work with acceptance and still go back to the things I did value and do it differently?
Yeah.
So I would say for that camp, it's more about mapping, your resources, even involving your family and friends and saying, listen, there are certain things I would like to go back to. Some of the things I have my own capacity to do and to be able to be a part of that. And in some of them I need support because I value it so highly. So I would like to be a part of it. Even if it can't be exactly as it used to be, it might be in a different way. But I would love it to be similar because I value it. So for that camp, I would say that sort of mapping usually is helpful. And try to be really self-empathic when if you realize there's certain things that I just value so highly and that I love, but I won't have the capacity to do anymore. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do it at all. Maybe it means you have to try to do it differently. And I would say that flexibility is a very important thing to train up during this. So if you know that, I'm a routine person, I love the way I used to live my life, and now I can't because of circumstances, then I need to see, how can I find a new kind of routine and normality in that?
Yeah.
And go back to the things I valued.
And what are some ways, because acceptance is a word that keeps coming up whenever we talk about, and whenever we personally venture through crisis, grief, or challenging times, acceptance. It's such a powerful word, but I'm sure, and I'm sure you have some tools or sort of tips on what does a person do to gain acceptance?
And I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think for a lot of people, when they hear, I'm glad that you find it a powerful word, because I do too. But I think a lot of people, when they hear acceptance, it's more of a passive word. Like, okay, I just need to deal with it, right? And that's not what acceptance is. Acceptance is not about dealing with things. Acceptance is more about exploring what it does to you and let that happen. And that can be a really painful journey. So it's not about dealing with for me is more about, here's the issue. Okay, I need to understand that issue is going to be a part of my life. But acceptance, like raw acceptance, is more about diving in the issue and exploring it and seeing, what does that do to me, and what's happening, what kind of feelings and thoughts are all of these things bringing up. And once I can accept that happens to me, and that I will have all of these feelings or thoughts and weird behaviors or whatnot, then I'm really getting there.
Yeah, exciting. I mean, that's and it's almost like it's not like it's almost like accepting. It's not acceptance of cancer specifically, or it's not acceptance of my change of identity specifically. It's just acceptance of what is. Like, let whatever is happening to you flow through you, whatever that is. Like, bring on whatever feelings you have and just let them flow. Don't resist them. That's sort of what I read from what you just said.
Exactly, that's correct. And that takes a lot of courage to do that. So that's what I mean with the difference between talking about acceptance as a passive word and actually doing acceptance, because it takes so much courage to be able to dive into all of your fears and thoughts about yourself and really exploring that. That takes courage, and it's hard to do. And I mean, sometimes you might not even have the courage to do that, and that's acceptance too, right? To just say, you know what, that's too painful right now, I can't really dive in. But I can see that about myself, that the fear is overwhelming. And that's a way of getting close as well.
Wow. So are we now, and this was camp one, so it feels almost like that's something for camp, that people that want to explore further, or is this still, are we still in the camp one, so the people that just want to get back to what was?
I would say that even if for people that want to go back, that's also a part of, you need to have acceptance in your life for that camp as well, because you can't ignore the experience of a crisis. I mean, even if you go back, you can't really close your eyes and think that was just a part of my life, now I'm just going to erase it and go back to normal. Because for most people, even if you try, you won't be able to. So you have to have acceptance in that camp as well. But if we move on to the other one, because you said if camp 2 is more about moving on and being able to question your past life and seeing what the new one has to offer, I would say there is that part takes a lot of courage, in the sense that you really need to dive in what these experiences have done to you. Maybe you need to second guess your values, how you've lived your life, how you want your life to be about. And those are questions you might not be able to answer just like that. So how do I want to create my new life? And I think that is why a lot of people want to go back to their old selves, because if you don't have the answer to the future, a lot of people get scared and feel like, so what am I going to do? Am I going to live in this kind of limbo where I don't know who I am? And I would say yes. If you really truly want to explore your feelings, your thoughts, your values, what you're doing in life, your purpose with your life, I would say that limbo is a part of that. And exploring that as well.
And I guess this is one of those things where biology and evolution is going to work against your full potential. I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, change, which this is all about change, right? Mm-hmm. Change is not good for when we were hunter-gatherers. Any change or anything that sort of alters what is the reality right now is increases my fear of dying. Mm-hmm. So we biologically are against change.
Yes.
Yet at the same time, change is constant. Everything is changing all the time. So at the same time, learning to embrace change and accept change is, I think, one of the deepest journeys that a human being can do in life. And this type of opportunities is, I guess, even more presented during cancer, because there's no hiding about the fact that so many things are going to change at the same time. So it's a struggle. But I love the fact that we're deep diving so much. This is sort of core. I think we're going core mental health here. But let's bring it back to the topic of identity, which is the topic of today. So, when we feel we lose a part of our identity. It might be our hair, our looks, our bodies, our sense of humor, whatever it is. What can we do to feel more normal? I don't want to use the word normal because it puts a label on us going through cancer as not normal, but a regular person. Like how do you know, how can we feel more like just the typical non-diagnosed person, even though we're diagnosed?
Yeah. And I think an important part of that is how you also handle conflict within yourself. And what I mean by that is, because when you're out with your friends and family and etc., and you haven't really got that clear for yourself, it's really hard, because when you go out in your network and you get different kind of reactions, you don't know how to react, because you're not really clear about what you want, or what your identity is, and what you do is you try to create some sense of normality, or being regular, so you just act, and that actually can have the other effect of you being false instead, and not having those deep conversations, etc. So one important thing is to actually be open about what you're going through, and saying, listen, I'm really struggling with normality. I'm in this, I want things to be normal. At the same time, I have my disease, and I feel that people are treating me differently. So I'm really, I'm in this phase of limbo. And sometimes you might need help,
Yeah.
from people saying, hey, listen, you stop doing that. Is it because you don't like it anymore? Or is it because you just forgot? Or what is that about? So you can get help from your surroundings about that, I felt that you really appreciated doing tennis every other week. What happened with that? Is it about your disease, or is it that you don't like it anymore? Are you interested in something else? And you can also ask yourself those questions. So I would say, for a lot of people, when you get sick, what alienates you is that you try to act like everything is normal, but you're not really honest about what you're going through. And that actually can do the opposite, that you lose touch with what is you. So you become this kind of, behind the mask, there's not a substance really.
Right. And this is also touching upon another, that's a really important, why do we do that? Why do we fake it? Like, what is that, a human tendency, or?
Definitely it is. And you talked about gatherers before. I would say that the most painful thing for human beings through all time has not been just external, as in animals or fast cars hitting us, etc. It's been about being alienated from our groups. That's the biggest fear we have, not being a part of something, people not wanting to be with us. So, I mean, we're social animals. That's something we really need to be able to accept ourselves. We need some kind of insurance that, I'm still a part of the group.
Right. And so you need to really build up, again, feels like we're coming back to courage. So you need to be courageous enough to believe that even though I show myself as vulnerable to my surroundings, they will still love me and include me in the group.
And you know what, if I'm going to be completely honest, some might not.
No.
And that's painful. And some might not appreciate the change of dynamic in the relationship. And some people might not be open to it. And that's also reality. So I think there's two main important things to work on when you're in a crisis and you want to find some kind of sense of normality, is to work on your flexibility. And to work on the openness towards yourself. So what are my needs? How can I map the things that are going on? How can I test that to my surroundings? Do I have safe places where I know some people will be accepting, or at least I think they are, and try some things with them and see how they land? So you don't have to go full on, on your motorcycle into the courage. You can also, try and be empathic towards yourself when you're doing it.
Sort of test it a bit.
Mm.
Yeah. What? So, in the topic of I think one thing that you touched upon here was communicating. I mean, it's so important. I think this is where, because a lot of people talk about cancer ghosting and people treating you differently, and it's easy to be complaining. But if you think of it from your friend's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
they are going through a fearful experience as well, because they associate cancer with death or something super horrible. So they are fighting they're doing their best to treat you the best they can, but it's just not going to fly because they have this inner, worry, and they don't know, like nobody. I remember one thing that I said jokingly when I was sharing my blog, and I said, nobody invites me for after works anymore, because it just, all those type of like dinner invitations, all of it just dried up. It's like, what? It would be wonderful to, because I used to be I still am, and not this, I used to be quite a social guy, so I was like, what happened to all is it that you think that I'm not allowed to drink alcohol, for instance, or is it like what? And then a lot of people reached out and said, what? I had no idea. I'm not inviting you. We're not invited because of the fact that we think that you don't want to join, right? And I said, it's a huge difference for me to be able to say no, because often I'm not, I didn't have the energy to go out.
Yeah.
Whilst in the middle of, chemo treatment. I did sometimes. I did when I had energy, and I loved it. I didn't go and drink, obviously. I did. But I was just enjoying the social gathering, right? But it's just the feeling of not getting the invitation. That's was the most horrible thing. And then seeing your friends on some kind of social media channel, being out without you. But it comes down to communicating as well. Like you said, communicating your needs, right? Or say, if you love playing tennis, tell your tennis friends, like, I want to continue playing tennis. Yeah. Let's just make sure that the invitations keeps going, and I'll let you know if I can't make it. So I think that's something. It's up to us patients, I think, in that sense, more than it is to the loved ones.
And it's also about, I really liked what you said about people they didn't really know. Like when you said, I really wanted to come on the after works, they were like, it sounded like they had this empathic move towards you. We don't want to put you in a position where you say no to us all the time, right? So somehow they took responsibility for something that you did not ask for. And usually when you're close to people, that's what people do. I mean, we always, we don't know some things. I mean, it's really good with straightforward communication, but we can't do that all the time. So sometimes we just do the way we're comfortable of doing things. And taking responsibility for each other is something that's quite, that's the social aspect of being a human. But there it's really important to help people out to helping you in a good way. So by saying that, like you said so wisely, I would like an invitation every time. Maybe 70% of the times I will say no, but it's really, I feel warm when you ask me to come. So that people can feel at ease at not feeling that they're walking over your boundaries, etc. So it's a lot about communication, definitely.
Another topic that comes to my mind here, which is something we've discussed a lot of times throughout the years of sort of, I mean, your looks is going to change. You're going to look different. And we are identified with the way we look quite a lot. And here there is this diversion, I think, between people in different camps, I guess, again, where some say, you shouldn't have to wear makeup or wigs or any type of, thing to make me look like a normal person, because it's not, it's sort of, it's really making me as a person it's belittling myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whilst the other camp is sort of, and I'm thinking mostly, I guess, about women in this instance, but others are like, well, if I'm identified with beauty, makeup, my looks, then I should pursue that, and really make sure to do whatever I can. Sort of, it feels like I'm on a thin ice here when I talk about these things. They are sensitive, but in general, what's your advice here? I mean, how do you go down that route? Sort of, if a person feels identified with long hair or something, is it an opportunity to question your identity? As in, well, I don't have long hair and I'm still here, right? So even though I don't have long hair, I'm still something. Or should you just go for that and kind of keep, yeah.
I would say our sense of normality is different depending on who you are. So for some people, it might be something really, concrete here and now that I can touch on and say, my having long hair is a part of who I am. I've always had that. So for me, that's a way of identifying normality. So
Yeah.
when I have that, I feel safe. So most things are about the sense of safety or knowing where and who I am. For others, it might be, I'm a mother. Being able to play with my kids outside defines who I am. So if I can't do that, that sense of normality is taken away from me. And for a third person, it might be playing tennis, bathing, whatever, doing something, painting, or something that I do that defines normality for me. And having that is really normal. So we need things to cling on to just have a sense of stability, because that's really what we're talking about. And when you lose that, it throws people into that limbo we were talking about.
Yeah.
So if I don't have that, this identity crisis comes knocking on my door, and how the hell am I going to handle that? So one thing is about survival. It's about clinging on to things that will give you a sense of stability. So if you don't have your hair, do you have something else that can give you a bit of stability? Because let's not underestimate the fact that you need that to be able to have courage or flexibility. You need to have some sense of stability.
Yeah.
So that is quite important. So I would say that if you don't find the thing you had before, try to see, what can I replace it with?
Yeah.
That's, step number one. And for some people, it might even be, I've lost complete control over routines and I can't even function, right? So then you need to work on that level. So getting back to eating, sleeping, because if you don't have that, there's no way your mind is going to help you sort all of those feelings and thoughts you're going through. And you won't be able to develop, definitely not, if you don't have those basics at place.
No.
So it's about levels, right? So after you build upon these, the levels where you just find some kind of stability, that's when you have the capacity to even think about, what do I want next? Is it about going back to living life the way I used to, as similar as I can? Or is it about finding the opportunity and seeing maybe I can develop something else or be, and you can do both. You can go back and see this is not what I wanted. My experiences gave me something else and I want to explore something new. Or you can explore something new and be like, listen, I don't really like this. I really loved some of the things from my old life and I want that back. So I'm going to, go
Yeah.
back to that. That's completely okay. But for you to be able to do those things, you really need flexibility. So that's why it's important to really train your flexibility and to train your openness towards yourself and acceptance that we talked about.
Mhm.
To be able to do this, hopping around and on all of the levels, you need to train those specific things about yourself.
I think that's a perfect way to end today's webinar. Wow, time flies. Thanks for some really, really interesting conversations today. And I think we hit upon a couple of super core development potentials within a person here. I've learned a lot, and
Me too.
also for you, for the audience here. So this is for this year. It's the last time Hana will be joining us due to a couple of other commitments. Hopefully, we'll be continuing the round of conversations with Hana from next year and onwards. From our end, we'll be looking most likely to continuing these type of psychologist sessions throughout the rest of the year. Please check out your emails or other conversations from War on Cancer, either socials or within the War on Cancer app, to find the information about the next sessions. As always, feel free to connect with us. My name is Fabian Bolin, as in my username is @Fabian Bolin in the War on Cancer app, or chat with the War on Cancer account or one of our community managers for anything you need from us, and from us at War on Cancer to you, Hana. Thanks for a great couple of sessions.
Thank you. It's been a privilege to have these conversations with you, Fabian.
Yeah, likewise.